Good afternoon, and welcome to our fourth community conversation this month in honor of Black History Month. We have some very distinguished local heroes with us today to talk about their noble mission, N-O-B-L-E. We'll talk about what NOBLE stands for in just a second. Thank you to the community for joining us for this month's conversation. Tens of thousands of viewers have watched this special series across our social media platforms, and teachers have used the videos as part of their curriculum in our schools here in the city of Aurora. Normally, we would have celebrated the annual African American Heritage Dinner last night on the last Friday of February. Unfortunately, we couldn't do that this year. But this series allowed us to shine a spotlight on Black excellence to exponentially more people. Each year at the Heritage Dinner, I am honored to join the African American Heritage Board to congratulate high school seniors who received the Henry Coward Scholarship. It is always a personal honor for me to watch our next generation of leaders pursue their dreams. We wish all the past recipients of scholarships the best, and we look forward to resuming the scholarship program this year. Each year, I also look forward to presenting the Mayor's Lifetime Achievement Award at the Heritage Dinner. We instituted the award the first dinner after I was elected and have honored some trailblazing Aurorans ever since. In 2018, we honored Avis Patterson Miller, a longtime community leader on the east side of Aurora and someone that I actually grew up with in low-income housing, Indian Trail Apartments. She was the leader of our community, the matriarch, and she started us off at a young age, making sure that we did the right thing. In 2019, we honored Larry Shepard, a longtime educator at West Aurora High School. Shep is what we call it, real cool guy, real goodness, and dedicated his life to education. We thank him for his service to the community. In 2020, just before the world changed, we honored both Cynthia Miller, a stalwart community advocate who has worked with our youth for decades, and Mr. Herbert Hill, the first Black attorney in Kane County and the first city attorney for the city of Aurora. While Mr. Hill couldn't be with us in attendance in person, his mentee, now Judge Reggie Campbell, my former law partner, accepted the award. And let me just tell you a little bit about Herb. Herb, as I became a young lawyer in Kane County, was my mentor and showed me the path of success in the legal field. Unfortunately, we lost Herb, late last year. May he rest in peace. I've decided to change the name of the award to the Herbert Hill Lifetime Achievement Award based on all he did for our community over his years of service, being the first African American lawyer in Kane County, being the first African American lawyer to represent the city of Aurora, and just being an all around good person and good role model for our young people coming up here in the city of Aurora. While we didn't host a dinner this year, I didn't want to miss the opportunity to present the Herbert Hill Lifetime Achievement Award for 2021. This year's recipient is much like Mr. Hill because he also broke barriers in the field. I could have presented this last week, but felt today's topic provided the appropriate platform to present this award to a lifetime achiever who broke barriers in Aurora Police Department as the first Black sergeant, first Black lieutenant, and the city's first ever Black chief of police. And it's not just because he was the first. He committed his career in law enforcement to excellence and continues to serve in multiple capacities throughout the city in law enforcement. We asked him to join us today for a special welcome, but really, I asked him to join us today to virtually present him the 2020 Herbert Hill Lifetime Achievement Award. That goes to Chief William Powell, we call Brother Brown. Let's give him a round of applause.
Wow. Thank you, Mayor. You certainly threw me for a loop, but I certainly appreciate the honor, really, because it was my honor to serve the citizens of Aurora and the Aurora Police Department. But that really means a lot, man. And I'm usually not lost for words, but right now it's just wow. So from the bottom of my heart, and thank you very much. It means a lot to me.
Well, let me just say that you are absolutely welcome. And, I always looked up to you as a leader in our community. Not many folks know when you're one of your first partners on the streets as you became a young police officer was a guy by the name of David Kamek.
Yeah.
David Kamek, I worked as a law intern, my first law intern job ever at David Kamek's firm. And your wife worked there for a number of years with me as I was there as an intern, and she was assisting David Kamek as their legal assistant. And you would stop in all the time to visit, as a police officer. And back then I didn't know you, and I'd always look up to you and say, man, one day I hope I'm like that guy there, with that confidence, the ability to, walk in a room and be strong and just be proud to be Black and kind of make the way through life and show others how to follow in your footsteps. So thank you for that, brother. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you.
Brother, let me ask you, man. There's a big responsibility about being the first, and doing the job as a police officer, not just being African American. Doing the job as a police officer is hard enough, but doing as a Black man or as Black men and women. Can you just give, your just brief opinion as to why you think it's important for us to have Black officers in the community of Aurora and all communities throughout our country?
Right. Well, this past year has really been a turbulent year as far as policing is concerned. Certainly, with the events of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, brought a huge spotlight and a lot of criticisms on policing here in America. And right or wrong, whichever side of the aisle you're on, policing started to recognize that we have to do something different. We have to turn around and change. So us being here today, it really gives us an opportunity for our community to hear from us as African American police officers and as members of the National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives, NOBLE, our perspective on how, no matter how we're perceived from, when outsiders, and I'm saying people on the other aisle, people that are not in the law enforcement professions, on the importance of African Americans in law enforcement and how we impact our community as a whole. And when I say that as a whole, I truly mean as a whole. I'm not just talking about the Black community or the Hispanic community. I'm talking about our community as a whole. Especially during the time of today. Recruiting is certainly, trying to bring more African Americans into this profession to let them know the importance of this profession and how they can truly impact the community is one of our goals at NOBLE. And it's very important because I have said several times that we as African Americans, I think we have somewhat of a leg up in a sense when it comes to policing, because we come from the African American community, and a lot of times that's where some of the issues that occur. We come from that community. We understand that community, and yet instead we come from the community as a whole. And I always related to the point in the sense is that we're not afraid in the sense to go into the African American community and deal with issues that are happening there.
That's where you're from. That's where you're from.
That's where we're from. And unfortunately, not all, but some officers in policing are a little bit skeptical because going into the community because they have never really communicated with our kind in a sense. So they go in being somewhat skeptical sometimes. Now that doesn't mean all officers, because I'm telling you, I've seen some white officers go in the Black community and have done fantastic and relate real well. So it's just some. And I think that's where we get the issues that we have today in policing. Some police officers are a little bit afraid. They tense up and then they turn around and go out and make mistakes like we see unfortunately on TV all the time. So NOBLE, we're out there for the community. We're in the community, and I would tell anybody that's watching any organization or anything like that, we have to have these conversations. It's black and white. We have to have these conversations if we're going to change our community and we're going to change our world. So we're there, for the community. You can reach out to us at any time, organizations to talk to kids, churches, whatever, and to bring our perspective and answer the questions that the community has of us. So Mayor, I applaud you for doing what you're doing and having us on this panel today. Thank you.
Thank you, kind sir. Really appreciate it, brother. Really appreciate it. And we have different cultures, as we grow up, whether, it's the, culture that you deal with. You know, when I say culture, you know, just things that we practice as a community. You know, different people practice Christmas different ways, or you know, or Thanksgiving different ways, and in the Black community, which isn't always the same wherever you go, you know, but there's a culture. So, you know, it's about understanding the base Black culture and being able to deal with it in a policing manner when you're police officers, and coming from that culture. You know, it's, as you said, we have a leg up. It's easier to understand the culture. So if you see a kid walking down the street with you know, his pants hanging down in long braids, if you understand the culture, he doesn't necessarily, when you look at him, have to be, you know, a thug or a gangbanger.
Exactly.
He can just be a kid that just likes that style, you
Yes.
know, and you just have to understand the culture. So it becomes, it can be difficult for sometimes, but the more officers we have of color, you know, the more officers we have of color, you know, in the police department with the non-Black officers that can, you know, relate to them, the more police officers we have on the streets in the community, you know, the better it is for the city, you know, as a whole. So, man, thank you for being the first, brother. Thank you for first of a lot of things, Sergeant, Lieutenant, Chief, you know, and thank you for what you've done for the city of Aurora and all your service. But let's talk to our officers that are actually, you know, on the police department now, you know, out in the community, dealing with, you know, different cultures in different parts of the city of Aurora, and you know, what they think as far as, you know, the need to recruit more officers of color to the police department, and how it'll not just affect our city and our community, but how, you know, how the positive effect it could have on the police department. So let's start with Skyy Calice. You know, can you Officer Calice, can you introduce yourself and tell our listeners exactly what you do for the police department?
Good afternoon. I'm Officer Skyy Calice. I've been with the Aurora Police Department since 2013, mostly located on the east side. I've been in community policing, patrol, and I'm currently the school resource officer over at East Aurora High School. I also run Girls Run the World with Officer Pirela. We service East Aurora High School, West Aurora High School, Matia Valley. We also have a sister chapter in Yorkville at Yorkville High School.
What is Girls Run the World, just so our listeners know that may not be familiar with it?
Girls Run the World is a youth mentoring program for young ladies. We, as police officers, we come in contact with a lot of young ladies in high school in many different aspects of life, positive, negative. Sometimes they are being arrested. Sometimes they're struggling with their own issues or having family issues, and the police get involved. And a lot of times we in patrol don't have the opportunity to foster relationships long-term because we're busy, we're moving from call to call. So this program has helped us to connect with these young ladies, help them navigate through high school and venture on to the next parts of life, help them to work out, you know, self-esteem issues, leadership issues, conflict resolution issues. And a lot of these young ladies are now interested in law enforcement in different aspects, or just knowing that they can do more than what's in front of them.
Thank you very much for everything you do, not just for our police department, but for our community and for our young women as well. Let's go to Officer Walls. You with us? You with us, Red? He might be having a few difficulties with his camera. You with us? Can you hear us, sir? Can you turn the camera towards you so everybody can see you? Because it looks like it's pointed away from you.
Right. It'll be a minute.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll come right back to you, brother. I'll come right back to you. Let's go to Officer Whitfield. Call him Will. Can you introduce yourself, brother?
There we go. Good afternoon. My name is Officer Will Whitfield. I'm currently assigned to the patrol division at the Aurora Police Department. I've been with Aurora Police for 2 years now. And just as Officer Calice I have a mentoring program that's run out of East Aurora High School, where we kind of focus on the same things, defeating the odds mentoring. It's fairly new to the community. But it's my hope that we will get to a point as Girls Run the World where we will be able to branch out to those other schools to help those young people.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, bro. Thank you for serving on the police department as well, and everything you do, not just police department, for our community and our young folks. You know, and before I go to the next officer, you know, I just listen to the officers as they speak who don't just talk about their job, but talk about what they want to give back to the community, and and how that I believe, and I think we all recognize, affects the community as a whole. So that's very good. Let's go to Officer Pirela. Introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Star Pirela. I've been a police officer for 13 years. I started here at APD in 2016. I am born and raised in Aurora on the east side, in a very rough environment filled with gangs and drugs. And I became a police officer so that I could change the way that the community sees policing. I always had bad interactions with police growing up because of where I lived and what we were involved in. And I want to see the community have a positive interaction with police and be able to confide in us when they need help and run to us when they need help. I'm also part of Girls Run the World, as Officer Calice said, and constantly trying to mentor girls who may have grown up like me or may have had situations where they aren't confident in themselves or they need help or guidance in life. So we're just out there trying to make things better for our community.
And thank you for that. Something that you said is extremely important, and we're going to get into it as we have this conversation today about the need to recruit more young African Americans onto the police department. I also grew up on the east side, and what some might call the hood, gangs and drugs and whatnot, reality in my environment. And in that environment, oftentimes, we look at the police as the enemy, somebody that's not necessarily on our side. And for you to have recognized that and said, I want to dispel that image and perception of what a police officer can be to our community and show that, policing can be positive for us, that's very insightful. And, not many, recognize that, and the police can consistently, stay the enemy. And I think this conversation today is to say that the police don't have to be the enemy of our community. Matter of fact, the police can be our friend. And thank you for that, for Star, and everything you do. Looks like we have Officer Walls on with us. Can you hear us, Reg?
Yep, I can hear you.
All right, brother. Introduce yourself and what do you do for APD now, and how long you been there?
Officer Reggie Walls. I've been an officer with Aurora Police Department in my 24th year. Currently in Patrol Division as a field training officer.
What does a field training officer mean?
I train the new officers as they get hired from the academy or a former law enforcement. So I train them on how to do this job properly.
So all the officers that walk through the door, regardless of the color of their skin, Reg, you're training them up, making sure they're the kind of police officer Aurora Police Department needs, right?
Absolutely.
My man, thank you for everything you do and for all your work with the police department to make it, the police department we all know and love and have come to respect for the work that you guys do. All right, let's go to our command, and let's start with Lieutenant Liz Robinson Chan. Can you tell a little bit about who you are and what you do for the police department? What does it mean that you're a lieutenant? What does that mean?
Yes, sir. My name is Lieutenant Liz Robinson Chan. I am a lieutenant in patrol on second shift. I work Area 2, so my area of control is from the Fox River all the way east to the county line, which is just east of Farnsworth. I have 4 sergeants under my span of control and almost 30 officers on our shift. I just pretty much oversee the day-to-day operations of the department and just make sure that everything is, squared away and running as it should. I address any issues that arise, respond to more of the higher risk calls rather than the daily day-to-day calls. I actually became a police officer because I saw a lot of negative activity interactions with police as well when I was growing up. I'm not from Aurora, but I do live in Aurora. I've been here for almost 3 decades and I do call Aurora my home. But I just want to be a positive influence, Mr. Mayor, part of that bigger picture and, getting the community and the police, bridging that gap, bringing us together so that we can pretty much work towards the same common goal.
Absolutely. Now, this actually is the second Facebook Live session that you've been on with me. The first was the firsts in Aurora, and you were identified as the first African American to ever reach the command level at lieutenant. Because let me break it down for police. So at the top, you have the chief and deputy chief, then you have the commanders, then you have the lieutenants, and then under that, sergeants, and then all the 200 and some odd police officers are under you guys' control. So you are the first African American woman ever in the history of the city to be promoted to sergeant and to be promoted to lieutenant in command, helping to run the entire police department. So thank you very much. Yeah, absolutely.
It's actually my third segment with you.
Yeah. Which one? Which other one were you on with me?
The women in leadership.
Yes, absolutely. The women in leadership. Is that your little girl? Hey there, how you doing?
There, she's supposed to be doing something else right now.
Introduce her to us.
This is my pride and joy, my Angelina. She's my one and only.
Oh.
She is that final piece of the puzzle that makes my life complete. And she keeps the fire burning for me, and I live and work for her, and she is my everything.
Angelina, thank you very much for joining us and coming on and having this conversation with us a little bit. And it's very nice to see you. And you're getting so big. Last time I saw you, I swear you're only, you're like 3 inches shorter. So, you look very, very cute. How old are you?
6.5.
6.5 years old. I'm actually very glad that you stepped. Let me tell you why. Because oftentimes when we see police officers driving on the street in the police cars and uniforms, we don't look at them. We don't think of them as regular everyday people with families, and cares and concerns about our community, and just regular people that just, want to do a job and make their neighborhoods as safe as possibly can be. So thank you very much for joining us and letting us know that you guys are just more than police officers. You're people just like us, Thank you for that. Absolutely. All right. So let's go to last, but definitely not least. And we left this for last, brother, because you one of the top, you're the top dog in the police department, man. So let's go to my brother, Deputy Chief Cross. Tell us a little bit about who you are, your background, and what does it mean to be Deputy Chief, brother?
First and foremost, Mayor, I appreciate you and Mr. Muhammad putting this thing together to let us talk about Noble and the Aurora Police Department. Congratulations to Bill Powell on his well-deserved award. Like you say, he's been a trailblazer and he kind of paved the road for many of us on the call. So well-deserved kudos to you, Bill. My name is Keith Cross. As the mayor said, I'm Deputy Chief of Aurora Police Department, current president of the Northern Illinois chapter of Noble. Been a police officer for 27 years. Like a few other people on the call, I grew up east side of Aurora. And like many others, I took the job because I had a passion to serve other people. And Mayor, you said something earlier about culture. And it was one of the reasons why I took the job, because, as I was growing in the profession, that word rung out to me, the culture. And sometimes in order to change the culture of a profession or an agency or a business, whatever it is, sometimes you have to do that from within. It's not to say that, protesting or voting and things like that don't make a difference, because they do. But I think that you can have more of an impact by actually getting into an organization and being that change that you want to see in other people. And those day-to-day, person-to-person interactions with people, to me, is how you really change the culture and how you change community's perception of law enforcement. So as far as being a deputy chief, I oversee the operations, patrol operations and investigations, basically oversee the police department day-to-day operations. I'm blessed to work with a great group of people who help me in that endeavor, because it's not an easy task, but it helps when you have a great group of people to work with that stand by you side by side and help you get the job done. So I'm very appreciative of that.
Well, thank you for all you do, man. And me and Keith went to high school together. He's 1 year ahead of me in high school, went to East Aurora High School. So, man, we kind of came up together, man, and played in the same neighborhoods and hung out together as young people coming up. So it's I'm proud to see you working your way up, through the police department and becoming, a leader, one of the top leaders, in the police department, our community. And that's important for our young people to see, especially, our young Black people to see that, that if you work hard, you can get to the top. And I want to ask you, not only are you the Deputy Chief of Police, you're also the president of an organization called Noble. Before we talk about Noble, let me just tell a quick story about, one of my first interactions with a police officer. I was about 21. I just got out of the military. I was driving down the street, probably speeding, but I didn't think I was. Wanted to dispute the ticket, and so I drew up this long, cross-examination. Didn't know nothing about being a lawyer. Didn't even think that I, at that point, could even ever become a lawyer. And it was years later that I decided that I could actually become that. But anyway, I went to court, had my boards all drawn out, and I was going to go to trial with this police officer. Now, for some reason, the prosecutor talked me out of going to trial and said that I could pay a lower fine for speeding and whatnot. But as I walked away from that whole experience, I said, the only way that I felt like I was treated unfairly, even I may not have been, but I felt like I was. And I determined right then and there, if we're ever going to ensure fairness in a system, the only way to change that system is from within. And from that point on, I started my track on becoming a lawyer and, and a prosecutor, so I can work within the system to change the system. And I'm not going to lie, when I first got there, and as a prosecutor, I was a part of Noble as well. And we'll talk about Noble in a second. And when I was there, I said, you know what, every single day when I was in court, I saw someone I knew, some African-American, some Black person I either grew up with, or their kids, and I knew them because they'd be coming in with their kids every single day. It never stopped. It never failed. I would see somebody I knew. And I said, you know what? I don't know that I can do this, man, because I'm prosecuting every day in court. Seems like I'm just prosecuting my people walking through the door. And I was going to quit, after, a couple months. But, a guy pulled me aside. Matter of fact, it was Gary Johnson, who was partners with David Cammett. And he was a former head state's attorney. And he pulled me aside. He said, Richard, if you don't stay here at the state's attorney's office and ensure that people that look like you are treated fairly, no one will. So you have to stay to ensure that you can change the system from within. Because if you leave, the system will stay the same way that you don't like and you don't appreciate. So at that point, I decided I was going to stay and joined Noble. So Keith, will you just give us a little background on what Noble is and what it's supposed to do? I know Bill Powell talked about it a little bit, but as the president, will you talk a little bit about Noble?
Sure, Mayor. Noble basically is, Lieutenant Robinson Chan mentioned it earlier about bridging the gap between law enforcement and the community that we serve. But it was started back in 1976. There was a group of about 60 Black police executives from across who got together from across 50 different states. They got together in Washington, D.C., basically to discuss low-income urban areas and the problems that they were experiencing. And it was a 3-day symposium, and through those discussions, they find out that many of them are dealing with some of the same issues, and that's no different than policing. We tend to talk to other police agencies around the country, and it's funny that they have some of the same issues that we have. So what they did was, instead of trying to address all of these issues as a single, as each agency, they decided to form Noble into one entity and speak with one common voice. So some of the things that they were trying to address were minority hiring and promotions, police community relations, some of the same things that we're talking about. And there's about 60 chapters across the United States, broken up into 6 different regions. And there's also chapters in the Caribbean, United Kingdom, and several chapters over in Africa. It's a national organization. And we belong to one of 3 chapters here in the state of Illinois, and we're in Region 4. Our purpose really is to serve the community. Like we said, we do that in a variety of different ways. We provide scholarships to African Americans going into law enforcement at several of our community colleges. We have a coat drive every year in which we give out coats to needy families. This past winter, we gave away I think it was 10 $200 grocery cards to needy families so they could have food during the holidays. And we send our officers to some of the national conferences for training and networking, just to try to get them exposed to some of the things going on in law enforcement around the country, and also meet some other people of color around the country experiencing some of the same things that they're experiencing.
That's great, bro. That's great. You know, before we, Noble is a very important organization, you know, national organization for Black law enforcement executives, which is how I was able to, as a prosecutor, to be a part of not just officers, but all executives, you know, anybody involved in law enforcement throughout the country. You know, let's play a quick video that gives a little background on it. Mr. Muhammad, can you roll that video for us?
I'm a young Black man doing all that I can to stand. Oh, but when I look around and I see what's being done to my kind, every day I'm being hunted as prey. My people don't want no trouble. We've had enough struggle. I just wanna live. God protect me. I just wanna live. I just wanna live.
Wow. Yeah, that was powerful. You know what? Let's have a deep conversation about, you know, what you guys are dealing with, you know, in the police department, and let's just be real about it. Let's talk about the past year in particular, where so much attention has been placed on police and community interactions, while a global period of racial reckoning is happening. Being both Black in law enforcement and wearing that blue, talk about the impact that it has on you personally and professionally. Let's start out with you, Skyy, Officer Calice.
This past year has been rough on everybody in law enforcement. To be Black and to be in law enforcement is a total different struggle. Just feeling conflicted between your people, your community, and to being in law enforcement. You know the people that you work with, and you work with some great officers, but you also know that there are people in this profession that don't serve the profession the way that the rest of us do. And it's disheartening. And even sometimes to have conversations with other officers all over and to hear different perspectives. And sometimes you can be disappointed by the things that you hear, and you may want to just walk away from it all. But this was the time for us to step up and get deeper in it and have those tough conversations and just be honest about how we feel, honest about our biases, their biases, why we perceive things a certain way, and help them to understand that we're not saying, or the community is not saying that all officers are evil, but they're speaking from their experience or the experience of a family member or what they see on TV. Maybe they've never had police interaction, but what they see is not very positive. So we as officers may feel hurt, like, oh my God, we're being painted with this broad paintbrush that we're all bad. We got to fight through that. And we have to continue to make the connection no matter what. So that's kind of what, just in summary of what we've been experiencing over the last 6 months or so. The fight is on even more now than ever. Absolutely. Now, Officer Whitfield, brother. Now, you said you've only been a police officer about 2 years, man. So you knew coming. Tell me a little bit about, how you felt personally and professionally, and something, Officer Calice just said, did you feel like, man, when it's all coming down over this last year, did you ever feel like, man, I just want to walk away from this?
So I've been a police officer in total for 5 years now. I've been with Aurora for 2 years. And during that time, as she said, this has been very challenging for us because at the end of the day, when we go home and we take off that uniform, we still have our backgrounds, where we come from. So holding those lines during those riots, and you are put in a position, right, where you have to do your job, but your views may be different than the person that's standing next to you. So they may not share that same struggle that you share. So being Black or African American in policing, it's almost as it's very difficult. It weighs on you emotionally, and we have to take that extra step to have those difficult conversations with our peers to help them understand that just because someone has a Black Lives Matter shirt doesn't mean that they are one that agrees that all police are bad. It's just, I think we have to look at it through two different lenses to help other people understand, but we also have to educate ourselves to be able to educate those that do not understand the reason that so many people are angry or frustrated within our community.
It's very, that's a very good point you make. And something that Officer Pirela said, and I'd like you to weigh in on this, Star, is, why is it worth having those conversations and staying in the police department? Why is it worth it?
As Will and Skyy said, the last year has been extremely difficult for us. At Aurora, we only have about 15 African American officers. We're a very small percentage. And we have basically started leaning on each other and going to each other with these troubles and problems. And we begin, a campaign where we want to recruit more minorities and get minorities in supervisory positions. And during that, we got a lot of comments from our coworkers, our community saying we're all blue. But you have to realize blue is a uniform, a job. It's not a race or a cult, our culture. At the end of the day, we go to work, we're police officers and we're trying to help the community. But like Will said, when we go home, we take that uniform off and we're just people living. And there were times during the last year that it was very hard to put the uniform on. After seeing that George Floyd video, several African-American officers, we text each other. We're like, we're struggling. But at the end of the day, how can I change that if I quit? If I don't come back tomorrow? I have to still keep coming and represent my community and let them know that there are good police officers and we are here to help you. And we need people like you to join us and to help. So for someone to quit, I couldn't do it. In my mind, it was a difficult choice, but I had to keep going and be resilient and say, those police officers made bad choices, but I'm going to make good choices and continue to service my community.
Absolutely. Man, wow, it's powerful. Let's go to Officer Walls, Reg. Hey, man, you've been on 24 years, brother. So you've dealt with a lot over the years. What has this year made different than maybe other years you've been a police officer?
Well, it has been difficult. I think what the community needs to understand too is just because we wear this uniform doesn't mean we agree with the other officers when they do the wrong thing, But the thing that keeps me going and the majority of us is that we come to work every day to help this community. And when you keep the citizens in mind, and that's why you're doing this job, it makes it easier, a little bit easier to come to work. As difficult as it was, that's what keeps me going is the citizens.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely, brother. And I want to thank you all for everything you do. I want to switch over a little bit to Deputy Chief Cross, being one of the top commanders in command in the police department, Deputy Chief, second in command. How difficult has this last year been for you? And what kind of advice can you give to these young officers under you coming up that look to be where you're at in their careers, and also to young African Americans considering becoming an officer, having seen what officers have dealt with over this last year?
Well, I have to echo what's already been said on the call, Mayor. Calling, and I think, like everyone else on the call said, you have to have those conversations. A big part of what we do in this organization is educating the public. And we go out and we talk to young people and older people as well about the profession, about some of the misunderstandings between the community and law enforcement, why we do certain things that we do, because we've learned through our careers that some of these things that you see on TV are from one or two things. It's usually one is a lack of training, or two, a lack of education. And if we can do our part by sending officers and getting training with some of the things that we talked about, knowing, different cultures and different things, and understanding that, certain activities not necessarily a threat, but this is how certain cultures behave. I think that educates our officers. If we can educate the public that, hey, these are the things that you can and can't do. When an officer tells you to step out of the car, you don't have a right to refuse. You have to get out of the car, and that's based upon the Supreme Court. So by teaching some of those things, perhaps we can cut down on some of those misunderstandings that come about on the street when people are dealing with each other. We don't have to see a George Floyd or some of the other situations that we've seen. As Star said before, and many other people said on the call, again, it goes back to, if you want to see things change, you can't just throw your hands up in the air and say, I quit. How's that going to change anything? So if we have more minorities in this profession, they can, when they're going through these interactions with other minority people, there's a certain comfort level that they feel, right, wrong, or indifferent. Although we all wear the blue uniform, I can tell you, and it's happened to me, and I know it's happened to other people, but if I get out of the car and someone who's not African-American gets out of the car and we approach a group of people, sometimes we're treated differently, and sometimes they're going to look at me and see my skin color and say, okay, I can talk to this guy, but I can't talk to that person. And that's something that goes way, way back. And you have to go back to history and how policing came about and slave days and different things like that. But as I said, right, wrong, or indifferent, that's the reality of it. And if you don't have not just African Americans, but Latinos, Asians, you need a diverse group of people policing a diverse population, because there's just a certain comfort level that people have when dealing with someone that looks like them, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely, brother. And I actually felt that when I was a prosecutor. And I can say some of the things that you guys are saying, I dealt with personally, as an assistant state's attorney. There were a number of times where I had to educate my white counterparts on culture. They'd wonder why, this person did this or this person did that, and I'd have to educate them, and I don't know that they necessarily, wanted to be discriminatory. They just didn't know. And until you educate somebody, they'll never know. And it's up to us to, and it's a shame. It's a shame that it has to be that way. People should, take that step and try to educate themselves. But we know how people are. They're not always going to take that step. So if we're in that position and we know, and it doesn't take any skin off our back, there's no trouble with educating somebody and helping them to understand so they can make better decisions in the future, in policing, and in my case, being a prosecutor. Now, let's go to Lieutenant Liz Robinson Chan for a second. Now, over the last year, not only did you not quit, with all this going on, you doubled down and went from being a sergeant to a lieutenant in the middle of all the, the drama going on in the last year, So tell us why, instead of you backing away, you said, no, I want to even gain more rank in the police department and grow even bigger so I can make a difference. Why did you do that?
I just feel like there's so much left to do, Mr. Mayor. And I was listening to all the conversation going on. And, if I can touch on this, like we talked about bridging the gap in the community. I just think about some things. I know, like, for example, we can't, as officers, abuse the public trust that are given to us. And we have to treat others better than we treat ourselves, better than we treat our loved ones and spouses and kids and all that. Because I know, like the saying goes, treat others how you want to be treated. But I know if we do even better, we can't go wrong. I heard some talk about systemic racism. But even with that, with systemic racism, we have to have systemic change. We have to start with ourselves. We have to make conscious decisions to do what's right. We have to help others and pay it forward. We as police officers, we should know better. We have to educate ourselves, educate the community. We are trained and educated, so it's our duty to do that and uphold the law. Therefore, yeah, we're always held at a higher standard. And instead of being driven to do the wrong thing to make a point, we have to drive to make that change peacefully and lawfully and through proper channels and resources. And I know you said you grew up in the hood. I grew up in what some people might consider the hood as well. I would just say that, from my upbringing, I would implore people within the community, have those conversations with your children. They're the foundation of our future. And we as adults, we have to set examples and be positive role models for them. Sometimes we have to make hard choices that put us in a bad spot. Others might not like it or agree with you, but we just have to always do what's right. And if you feel in your heart and your gut that, it's probably God giving you a nudge. I know I could say that I've dealt with people out in the community, and I listen to them vent sometime, and I know that people hurt when they're wrong. I know that forgiveness is a part of growing, developing. It's like we learn to forgive in order to be forgiven. It's like you take that control, you release that stress and pressure. I've had those conversations with people. None of us are perfect. We all fall short. And like they say, we can't throw stones when we live in glass houses. All of us have an obligation to come together and protect others. We have to look through wider lenses and not just like this and be narrow-minded. I just believe that people have to stop doing bad things to other people. We have to reach out, like to my daughter, we have to reach out to our sons and daughters and significant others, brothers, sisters, friends, loved ones, just to touch them and help make that difference. We have to mentor them so that they can make better choices, the right choices. There's just so much negativity going on now, Mr. Mayor. I just feel like we have to love in the midst of a storm, because we, as they say, all rise together or fall together, or, we fall short. I just say that I'm going to continue to strive and work hard and be of good service to APD in our community. I never forget where I came from, and I try to lift others up. We should all try and do that, lift one another up instead of trying to push one another down. I keep hearing Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. I see it, I feel it, hear it. I'm a female Black and Blue, like all the women on this panel. And I just feel like we're ready to take shots from any direction and do whatever it takes to help make things better. I just say that life matters, period. And we have to be a part of the healing process and not the hurt. It's my take.
Absolutely. Something that you said, and I had mentioned this on an episode of a Facebook episode that I was on just the other day, talking about history, never forgetting where you've come from. And you said that you can never forget where you've come from. And I believe that if you never forget where you've come from, if you always recognize where you come from, you always know where you're going. I can never forget who I am and that I grew up in low-income housing and the Aurora Housing Authority. And as long as I never forget, I'll always know the direction that I'm going, because I know from where I came. That was powerful. I appreciate that. Now, let's talk about which is important. And one of the main reasons that we're having this Facebook conversation is recruiting, getting more Black and brown, and Asian, as Keith, you pointed out, we need to have a multicultural mix of folks. I'm going to start with you, Keith, and I'm going to go to Star Pirela. What have we been doing, and what should we be doing to recruit, minorities, Black, brown, Asian, more minorities onto the police department? And is that important?
Well, first, yes, it is important. As we mentioned earlier, Mayor, we several years ago, we had a recruitment team at the police department, and we used to go to career fairs. I remember going to Western Illinois and a couple of other local places, and we would try and go and recruit people. And over the years, that kind of dropped off. About a little over a year and a half ago, that discussion picked back up, and the chief thought it was a great idea to start recruiting again. So we came up with a recruiting team. Put messages out, officers volunteer for the recruiting team. Actually, a couple people on the call, Skyy, Will, are on our department recruiting team. And right when, I think it was 1 or 2 meetings, and then all of a sudden COVID hit. So we weren't really able to go out and do a lot of the things that had come up in this meeting. Now, we were able to get to a few events. I know Will Skyy participated, some others participated in some recruiting events at the Outlet Mall, also at Fox Valley Mall. And as a result of that, we actually had one of the highest number of applications to the police department that we've had in several years. So, and that was just the little recruiting that we could do. Since then, we've obviously had several discussions, and we're working on putting together some new promotional materials, pamphlets, some new promotional video to kind of showcase, all the officers in our department, male, female, black, white, Hispanic, to show people, because again, I think it gets back to, it becomes a little more real when you see someone that looks like you doing the job. If you just see, a bunch of people, one color or one ethnicity, and you don't see anybody that looks like yourself, sometimes it doesn't seem as though it's attainable. So we're working on that. We're going to try to do some interviews and, radio, newspaper interviews, try to visit some historically Black colleges. I know that there's a couple of virtual events that we're going to be involved in here coming up. I think the next one is in April, where we can have some of our officers interact and get some of the information out to people, because a lot of people just don't know. And also try and educate people on what the qualifiers are. Everybody doesn't know what the qualifiers and disqualifiers are. So if we can talk about some of those things, and if someone is doing something now that they shouldn't be, they can stop, or keep themselves out of a certain situation. And we also want to target other professions that are similar in nature. Some people from a security background, it could be armored car background, people who have good communication skills, counselors, people who deal with, juveniles and things of that nature. So those are some of the things that that we have going on. And I'll let some of the others talk about some of the other stuff.
Absolutely. And something that you said, about, the qualifiers and disqualifiers of being a police officer. You don't have to be perfect to be a cop. Matter of fact, I think we all agree, that, cops are not perfect people. You just got to be willing to, follow the law and do the job. When I say not perfect people, no one's perfect. I'm not a perfect person. I'm probably one of the most flawed people you ever come in contact with, but I recognize what my role in society and, our community should be, and I stand up, and accept that responsibility and that role to make change in the community. Now, let's go to Officer Pirela. You and a couple of your officers, showed your folks that you're working with showed me a great presentation on how we should focus on recruiting in the Aurora Police Department over the next couple years, so we can get not just Black officers, Black, Brown, Asian, just a multicultural mix of officers, more minority officers on our police department. Now, who was that presented that way? Was that Officer Herrera?
Yes, we had Noble officers and Officer Herrera, who's new to APD, come up with this minority recruitment plan. At APD and like other police departments, we noticed that our makeup of police officers doesn't reflect the makeup of our community. Like I mentioned before, we have approximately 15 Black officers out of 300 officers, and Hispanic, we have a good bit of Hispanic officers, but again, it doesn't match what our community reflects. So we came up with a plan because we do want our community to be able to see people that look like them coming to calls at their home or helping them or, on a traffic stop with them. They want to see diversity. Aurora is a very diverse community, so our police department should reflect the same, whether it's an officer or a supervisor. So basically, we came up with a plan where we will attempt to recruit minorities. In policing, it is generally, I would just go out and say a environment where it's mostly a white male populated profession. And when you look at our community, that's not what our community reflects. So we want to get females, we want Black officers, Hispanics, Asian. We have an Indian population in Aurora. We encourage Indian people to apply. We want this police department to be as diverse as our community. So we all put our heads together to figure out how can we accomplish that. We've come up with several plans. A lot of it is getting out there in our community. I know all of us, when we go into Walgreens or Jewel, we'll even start trying to recruit cashiers. You know, hey, have you thought about becoming a police officer? Or when we go on calls and we see young men and women that look like, you know, they'd be good at doing this job, we try to recruit them. So, but our plan is basically gonna affect multi levels of doing social media campaigns. We're gonna go to colleges, sororities, fraternities, speak with them. We're trying to put the word out to any and everybody that we need people at this job that care about the community and that reflect what the community looks like.
That's very important, that the, you know, our departments, police department, fire department, city, you know, city public works department, you know, development department, it reflects a community. Now, I'll say this is not to take away from our white brothers and sisters in blue, you know, that go out there and do a damn good job protecting the city every day and protecting the Black community, the Latino community, all the communities. It doesn't take anything away at all. It just says that we want more, you know, minorities as well to assist everybody that's there. You know, as I said, I worked with David Kamek, who was a police officer before he became a lawyer and was Bill Powell's partner. You know, he's been, you know, my brother, you know, ever since I started years ago as his law intern, as he is Bill's brother. But that, and what he did is in the Aurora Police Department and all the other officers that look like him doesn't take away from their value in what they do. We just saying we need to make sure that we have more multicultural mix as we go forward. You know, we could talk on that subject all day, but I definitely want to talk about, you know, mentoring a little bit. So I want to just shift just a little bit to Officer Calice and Officer Whitfield, you know, and Officer Walls as well, doing as a training officer, mentoring young officers coming up. You know, as we close out, we'll take some questions if we have a few minutes to do so. As we close out, it's critically important that we talk about mentoring, both in your profession, you know, in the community. And I know you, Skyy, you talked a little bit about, you know, Girls Run the World, and, you know, some of the, you know, efforts that you do in mentoring young people. And let me just quote Frederick Douglass. He said, "It is much easier to raise strong men. It's much easier to raise strong boys than to repair broken men." Let me say that one more time. So much easier to raise strong boys than to repair broken men. All right. So what I believe he meant by that is, if we start with making strong young men and women at a young age, we don't have to worry about it trying to turn them around and get them on the right track when they're grown and already, you know, kind of in their own way. Skyy, can you tell me, why is it you feel that's important to mentor?
I would say, starting off in patrol, you come in contact with young ladies all the time. A lot of times I would see the ride or die girls that, you know, with their boyfriends, or they get into maybe a traffic stop and the boyfriend somehow convinces them to take the charges. You know, you're a female, they won't search you, or you don't have any charges, so you'll be fine. And then they call me over as a female to search the females. And too many times, now we got to put handcuffs on these young ladies, and now they go into the system. And it's disheartening. It hurts. It hurts to continue to do that, but also it doesn't help them. Okay, so now they're in the system, and then what? What's next? So we start developing programs to figure out how to help them use their leadership skills, because they may be the leaders of the girls getting into fights or whatever, but that means they have leadership skills. They have it. They just need to be directed elsewhere. And it's important to not continue to just send them to jail. Give them some resources. You got to look at the bigger picture. You don't know what home life looks like, what they've been exposed to, or maybe that boyfriend is the only family that they have. So instead of judging them and saying, you broke the law, that's it, let's work with them. And it's really important, because that is how you connect with the community, right? So if you've experienced certain things and been through certain things, now when you show up to a call, you can relate. Your first mindset is not going to be judgment. It's going to be like, I've been there before. I get it. Let's move forward. And so just representation is very important. We talk about that all the time. So when you show up as an officer, as a Black officer, as a Black young female officer, we checking all the boxes. You show up to another female and then they feel like, I can do this. It's the same thing as having our first female vice president. We never imagined that being a possibility for us. So by showing them that, all right, it's possible. We have so many young ladies who have backgrounds where their families have strained relationships with the police. They are interested now. So now as an SRO, when I hear information about the cadet program coming up, we're on it. Let's start getting prepared. What do we need to do to get you right? Mentally, physically in shape, and just make sure your grades are good. I'm going to walk you through it. And not just for Black students, for all students, but just having that relationship, putting yourself out there and being transparent. I'm completely honest with them. I'll let them know everything I feel, both positive and negative, about the career, the profession, the department, just anything, because I'm not going to just tell them to come be a police officer and show them the good parts of it and not be honest about it. That's setting them up for failure. I want them to know completely what they're getting into. And just to be able to have that platform and that relationship, to me, is amazing.
That is amazing. That's great. I mean, you know what, let me ask you also, Will, you know, I know you said your program was just getting kicked off before COVID started, but, you know, I expect you're going to get back on track. Tell me a little bit about it and why you do it.
The reason that I feel mentoring in the community and the capacity that I am in is so important is because oftentimes those young men, they are out seeking and searching for that leadership. So whoever's coming along the way to lead those guys, they're following, whether good, bad, or indifferent, but they were the first one to get their hands on them and convince them to follow them. So if me being a police officer, if I can be that first person to get a hold of them and guide them onto the right path, or come along and guide them on the right path and be that mentor for them, because most of all, being a police officer, you can't forget the empathy. So when you go into these calls, don't necessarily be quick to judge these people, but have that empathy role and being able to be that big brother or that person that will hear them out. And I think that's what we're, I guess, lacking, for a hipper word. That's what we're lacking in our communities. We're lacking that empathy role from these successful people that are out there to reach back and grab those troubled youth, as they call them. But these kids are just seeking guidance. I mean, when we get bored, when I was a kid, I got bored. We used to create games. So if that was who can race the car across the floor the fastest, that was a game because we were bored. So if we can develop programs when these kids get bored and provide them opportunity to grow, I think we'll do them a great service within the Aurora community.
Wow, that, you know what, that's absolutely great, man. It's something you said is powerful. Reach back. Now, once we become successful, you know, getting our jobs and start gaining, you know, and notoriety in what we do in our communities, it's extremely important because, you know, they say we open doors. But it's not just enough to open that door and even leave it open. You got to reach back through that door and grab somebody and pull them through. Yeah, and not everybody's going to want to. People have to be willing to come through that door when you reach back. You know, you can't. My grandfather used to say, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. But the reality is, we've got to make sure that we provide that water and hold open that door and reach back to see if people will come drink that positiveness that our community has out there. So let me go to Reggie Walls here. Brother, why is it that you do training and you think it's important to mentor young police officers coming through the police department?
Well, a lot of it is when you go on calls with different officers and you see sometimes that they aren't making the correct decision or doing things the right way, the best way to change is from the inside, you know. And so as a field training officer, you have that position where you could train them from the very beginning and teach them the right way to do this job, compared to some people teach them the wrong way to do it, you know. So that's why I became an FTO initially, is to train them. And it's not just training the new officers, it's also training some of the people that you have on the screen, on the Zoom meeting, you know, the younger officers, as well as when I got hired, you know, Bill Powell was before me, and DC Cross were before me. So, I take some of the lessons that they taught me and then try to teach some of the other officers that come behind me.
Absolutely.
Moving forward. But the mentoring is also not just with officers, it's with the community also. And one of the main things I teach is perspective. If you can change your perspective, you can change how you react to it. So everything's not negative. You got to turn a negative into a positive. And if you turn into a positive, then your reaction is going to be positive to it. So that's one of the main things I teach to the community and the recruits.
Change your perspective. That's deep, brother. Change how you look at a circumstance and turn a negative into a positive. And you could prevent a whole lot of things from going down bad just by simply changing a negative to a positive and changing your perspective and how you communicate and interact with a person. That's powerful, brother. That's real powerful. Let's we're coming up on time here, man. We can have this conversation all afternoon, but Deputy Chief, can you share some of the workshops that Noble has provided for youth programs and mentoring programs like Boys to Men?
Yeah, we like I said earlier in the Zoom call, we to me it's one of our most important functions as a group. We've gone out and talked to groups like Mr. Muhammad's group, Boys to Men. We've done things at East Aurora High School. We had a forum there. Out also not just the Aurora community, but also out in Elgin. We've gone and we've done some community talks out there in the churches. That's one of the things that we're most passionate about, because that's what we find to be some of the most effective things. And we simply go out and present ourselves just like we do today as not necessarily just the police, but we're also people just like them. We have problems like they do. And we have some open and honest discussions. I think, one of the most important things is just for us to listen, really, just to listen to them and their concerns. And then there's also the education piece. I learn just as much from them as I hope they learn from us. And those are the things that, we enjoy doing. And those are the things that we're going to continue to try and do more of. And, those are the things that we feel, again, are those impact makers. And like I said earlier, sometimes you have to be in it in order to change it. And I think that's what will help continue to bridge the gap between law enforcement and our communities.
Absolutely, brother. Absolutely. Let me ask one more question before we take some questions from the audience. How do you become a police officer? That's really the simple question. Let's say somebody's listening to this, or somebody's mom or dad's listening to this, and they want to, yell over there. How does somebody take that first step to even become a police officer? Let me ask Liz Robinson Chan, Lieutenant Robinson Chan. How does someone do that?
Well, the first thing you have to do is apply. We do have a system in place with the city of Aurora where you could either apply at HR, Human Resource Department, or you can go online on the city's website on their career opportunities. You have to be 21 years of age. You have to have a high school diploma or GED here now. You have to have a valid driver's license. It's recommended that you don't have a criminal background, but that doesn't mean that it'll prevent you from becoming a police officer as long as you don't have any, what I would say, felonies on your record. Not sure if I'm missing anything here. Someone
Keith,
else wants to chime in.
Star, go ahead, Keith. Go ahead.
2.5 GPA in high school or college. The testing process, what's important to know about becoming a police officer, it's not a fast process. It's not an overnight process. So as Lieutenant Robinson Chance mentioned, you have to take that initiative. You have to apply, then you have to take a written test. You have to be able to pass a physical examination. We have what we call the power test. So you have to be able to pass that. Once you get through those, you have to be able to pass a psychological exam as well as a polygraph test. And these things aren't done, one day, then the next day, then the next day. A lot of times there's some time, in between. So it's not a quick process, but I would encourage people who want to apply to be patient. And I think we've sped the process up a little bit, but I think we can also do a better job of trying to improve that system. but anywhere you look at it, it's a process, and it's not overnight, and it takes a little time. So you have to be patient, you know. And I tell people, you know, yeah, of course, here in the world we want good people, but I tell people, you know, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You know, you have to, you know, I'm sure multiple people on this call, we tested in different areas, you know, but we came to Aurora because this is where we wanted to be. I wasn't in Aurora when I first started. I was in Milwaukee, and I came back to Aurora because I wanted to serve my community. Star, she was somewhere else. She came back because she wanted to serve her community. So if this is something that you want to do or something that interests you, I say go for it. We need good people.
And you know, another thing, Deputy Chief, the civil service, you have to interview with them. That's the last step in that process. And I see that a lot of the candidates, where they lack or fail is that physical, that power test. So I would say just make sure you're in shape, because you have to take it initially, then you have to go through it again when you go through the academy, and you will not proceed, you know, if you can't pass that.
Absolutely.
Just express to people, especially of minority backgrounds, do not be discouraged about your background, your upbringing, your family's upbringing. I came from 800 block of 2nd Avenue. My family had drug dealers, gang members. You know, I didn't have the best record in high school. I was in trouble a lot, but I took a step to change my life. And when the PD interviewed me, I told them exactly what I had going on in my past, and that I was not about that life anymore. So if I can be a police officer with all that I had going on, any of you guys can, if that's your will.
Yeah, I know that we have a handful of police officers that I've personally talked to who have broken that cycle completely. And yeah, like Star said, don't be discouraged, because you can do it.
Absolutely. Mr. Muhammad, do you have any questions from the audience?
Yes, sir, definitely. Thanks, everyone. What a powerful conversation. Can we talk a little bit about the APD Cadet Program, what it is, why it's beneficial as a transition for young people into a career in law enforcement?
Commander Cross, now that we talked about, you know, how you apply when you're 21, but there's another way to kind of come into the police department too, and that starts when you're 18. Can you talk? And that's the Cadet Program. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, to me, it's one of the best kept secrets, and I know we're trying to do a better job of getting that out, but this is a program for people just getting out of high school who are interested in becoming the police. And you can come and apply. It's a similar testing process. You have to take a test. You have to be able to pass the psychological, the polygraph, similar to testing as police officer. But you're basically kind of doing on-the-job training. You know, you don't have a weapon or anything, but you're learning different things. You get to work in different departments and divisions within the police department. While you're working there, you're getting paid. You're also going to school because the department pays for 2 years of community college. So you're getting your education, and you're getting on-the-job training as to
You know, we lost him just for a minute. Go ahead.
So also, Mr. Mayor, you have to be at least 17 years of age, but you can't have reached your 19th birthday. You do have to work 20 hours a week at the PD. You have to maintain a GPA of 2.5. It's like a C average as well.
Okay. All right.
Am I still froze?
No, you're good, brother. You're good. You had just finished off with something. Go ahead, sir.
Okay. I was saying you get your education paid. You also are doing on-the-job training, and once your 2 years is up, you move to the top of the list to become a police officer. But the other thing I want to mention is some people that go through the cadet program, they figure out within that 2 years, it's not something that they really want to do, which I understand. Policing's not for everybody, but they can, there's no commitment at that point. You can just say, I'm interested in something else, you know? So it's really a great program. It's great thing to see if you really are cut out for the profession. And it's a win-win because, you know, we get a chance to kind of see how you work and how you might work out as being a police officer. You're getting your education paid for. You're also making money, and you're also getting an opportunity to see if this is something that you really want to do for the next 25 or 30 years.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, Chief Zeman also started out as a teenager in the cadet program, is now the chief of police.
Absolutely.
She's been here for 29 years. Yes, sir.
Wow, wow.
So she's a testament to, you know, the success of the cadet program.
Absolutely, absolutely. Mr. Muhammad, any other questions?
Yes, sir. We'll wrap with 2 questions. I know we're coming on time. First questions for Skyy and Will. And if I don't ask this, I think I'm going to get kicked out of the Divine Nine myself. So for Skyy and Will, because you're getting shout outs on social media, can you share with the community how before you became officers in this brotherhood, sisterhood, you were already part of brother sisterhood in college? Skyy, Delta Sigma Theta sorority, Will, Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity. And as we close out Black History Month, can you share how your involvement with Black Greek letter organizations prepared you for a life of service in the law enforcement world?
Yeah, sure. I'll start with that.
Start with you, Skyy.
Oops, all my sorors out there listening, I appreciate the support. But that is the core of our organization, is public service. And you have to align yourself with organizations that fit your morals and your beliefs. And I'm just from being a young girl, my mother, my father, my sisters, we all are about giving back. I grew up with 4 sisters, so there's 5 girls. So we had to share everything. We are just the people that just share, and we want to give. We want to make things better. So joining Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated was right up my alley, and it's about something bigger than yourself. We are blessed people as police officers, the salaries that we make. So give back. Even if you don't have things monetarily, whatever your talent is, whatever time that you have, give back. And just be in the Delta, you know, working with social justice fits along with being a police officer, because you got to fight the battle from the front line sometimes. So I appreciate my undergrad Theta Epsilon chapter Braille University for just preparing me to continue serving for a lifetime.
Will?
Yeah. So I am a member of Kappa Alpha Psi Fraternity Incorporated, and one of our goals or our milestones is achievement in every field of human endeavor. And service is also one of our pillars. So those things kind of align when it comes to police, because they prepare me in undergrad we had so many community service hours we had to provide. Had just like different initiatives that we had to complete. And they were all focused in low income areas to better that place. So they always preached us, leave that place better than it was when you found it. So it is my job, it's something that I take on to, when I go to these different communities and service these people, to leave them with something better than they had before I got there. Whether that's a piece of advice, maybe a break on a citation, or another resource that they can use. So it definitely prepared me for this field, because there were challenges that our founders faced when developing our fraternities and sororities, and we're pretty much just carrying on that dream that they had.
Thank you.
Right, Clay.
Final question to Chief Powell. Chief, as a statesman now here in the community, how can you share briefly how you've seen policing and interactions change over the course of your career?
Yeah, wow. There hasn't been a lot of change in my estimation. You know, we're starting right now. I think policing is starting to change, because police are starting to realize, because of the issues that we've had in the community for many years. Like I said earlier, you know, the George Floyd's and those type of incidents has put a spotlight on us, so that we have to change. We understand we can't go out and do the same things that we were doing before. So, I mean, we were always trained with a warrior mindset in a sense, but we have to change from warrior to server, you know, to be of service. We're no longer warriors. We don't go out, you know, there was a saying when I came on a job, you know, we kick butt and take names. You know, it's not like that anymore. You know, you have to realize, and to be quite frank with you, it's the better we are with communicating with the community, the safer it is for us as police officers out there in that community. Because the tendency now is not to turn around and look at us as the enemy, to look at us as, hey man, that guy or that female police officer, they're pretty cool, So we have to do our jobs, but it's just like the others on the call said, it's the way we turn around and do our jobs. And I think that policing now is starting to have more conversations and realize more that in our training, when we start training police officers, we have to include that, because policing, like somebody said earlier, it's culture. Every police department has a certain culture, and we have as a whole, the policing as a whole, we have this culture. And it's time for us now to turn around and start tweaking that culture, with young police officers, to make them turn around and see that that person that we see on TV that goes to jail all the time, and we look at that person in the community, that person in the community is not necessarily bad. We've got to get that out of our mindset that because of what somebody's wearing, is bad. It used to be gang colors, so we used to look at anybody that was wearing, black and gold, maybe as a Latin king. Probably weren't a Latin king, they were just wearing black and gold. So we have to change that mindset in policing today. And I think we're on the right track to start doing that, but we have to do it with conversations like we're doing today throughout the country.
Absolutely. Well, you know what? Let's close on that note. It's about changing how, and Reggie Walls said it best, changing, our perception of things, changing what we think about it, changing the narrative. And if we change that, that perception, then, we change who we are as a police department, we change who we are as a community and how we deal with policing in our community. I don't think there's any more honorable job than to serve. Honorable job in police officers, serving our community, putting your lives on the line and getting up every day, putting on your uniform, even though you have cute little girls at home waiting for you, and family waiting for you. You do it because you care. You have service in your heart and you want to make a difference. And wanting to make a difference just isn't always just showing up and putting on the uniform. Sometimes it's educating, it's teaching, it's reaching back. It's never forgetting where you've come from, so you always know where you're going. It's building up those strong boys so you don't have to repair in the future broken men. It's making sure that you continue to make a difference. You make a difference here in the city of Aurora. You make a difference in the Aurora Police Department. I'm proud of you, and I'm proud to work with you. And I'm proud to be the mayor of a city with such honorable people such as yourself and every single one of those 305 and 306 police officers we have on the police department, regardless of the color of their skin. I'm glad about the job that you do. And I'm glad that we had this series here, capping off Black History Month with you, African-American, your Black officers, talking about what we need to do to improve our police department and our community as a whole. So thank you. You guys have a great afternoon. I look forward to seeing you out there, and we'll talk some more.
All right.
Peace.